This is one of 20 community meetings that Sarah have organised across Greater Christchurch, particularly focused on green zone issues, and in that context, particularly around information for property owners in technical category 3. Can I acknowledge Mayor David Ayres, councillors, community board members, Member of Parliament Clayton Cosgrove, Chief Executive Jim Palmer from the District Council tonight. The main focus is to recognise that over the last couple of years, as the situation has evolved, the information needs, the complexity, the frustration is there and has grown. And so we have a series of speakers tonight who are going within the confines of a public meeting in a couple of hours, going to do their best to, from their particular perspectives, and you see the lineup here tonight, provide you with as much information and clarity as is possible in this context. Now, I dare say many of you will have quite site-specific issues that you'll want to raise. In the context of a wide public meeting, it may not always be possible to deal with those in the group as a whole, but all of the speakers tonight and all the agencies that they represent will be available afterwards for you to ask your specific questions that are very, very pertinent to your circumstances, as well as in the wider session pose questions that are of relevance to everyone. Just briefly in terms of housekeeping, you see the exit signs marked in the case of emergency, and recall that as you came in on the left going out and on the right as you came in toilets. So we've got a pretty busy program. We will have speakers from Sarah, EQC and Insurer representative first, and then we'll ask for questions on those specific issues. And then 3 more presentations and Q&A on that. We'll conclude, and as I say, representatives will be available to answer your questions to you individually or in small groups afterwards as well. Okay, can I hand over to Roger Sutton from Sarah to lead off?
Thanks, Simon. It's really nice to be here tonight in Kaiapoi. I was just going to start off with some sort of general comments about TC3 stuff, if that's okay. And then I've got maybe sort of a dozen or so slides. I think the first thing to say is that I think a lot of people are feeling incredibly frustrated with the speed by which things are happening. Or not happening. And I guess sort of everything we've been trying to do is, with the whole TC3 issue, has been trying to speed things up. There's a slide in here somewhere, which actually I'm going to race to because since we get right on this. But it just shows where we had liquefaction, say, in Christchurch. That was liquefaction in Christchurch following the September quake, and there's Kaiapoi there as well, Kaiapoi and Brooklands and so on. But then also that's the area of where we had liquefaction and land damage from the February quake. So our issue was, after those February quakes, was, a large areas of Christchurch had suffered some land damage. And we decided that unless we sort of tried putting circles around the areas which were most susceptible to future land damage, then what would happen is we'd have, if you like, before anybody got any sort of houses fixed anywhere in wider Canterbury, they were going to have to do a whole lot of really specialised geotech testing before that could go ahead. So I'm not quite sure what the number is, but we saw some land damage, but it's probably something like 80,000 properties across Canterbury had some land damage. And TC3's got about somewhere between 25 and 30,000 properties in it. So we thought, unless we actually, if you like, drew a circle around the areas that we thought were more susceptible to future land damage, what we're going to do was we're going to end up having all the geotech engineers, all the drillers, all the structural engineers, we're going to be really widely spread out all over Christchurch and all over Canterbury. And we thought that would slow the overall recovery down. So the idea of having different land categories of TC1, TC2 and TC3 was to try and make sure we actually got the resources into the areas where they were most needed. So the idea has been to try and speed up the recovery and not slow it down. But I know for a lot of you, it doesn't feel like that. So that unless we'd actually done that, we probably would have been trying to drill, vast areas of Christchurch. We're still going to drill large areas of Christchurch and Kaiapoi, but the amount we're going to have to drill and test is probably going to be roughly a third of what we otherwise would have had to have done. So what we're trying to do things to try and speed things up and not slow things down. The second thing was about these foundation designs. We knew that if people were going to get new houses built on TC3 land, and after testing you needed a stronger foundation, we decided we needed some standardised designs, because without standardised designs, every time a builder went to build a house, he'd have to go off to an engineer, and then the engineer would have to go off, if you like, from very first principles, almost with a blank sheet of paper, try and design a foundation that was going to work on this sort of land. He would have had to, and that would have taken a long time. And then when he went off to get it consented at the Waimak District Council, in your case, that also would have taken time, because he never would have seen a design maybe like that before. So what happened was we also decided, let's come up with some standardised ways of thinking about foundation designs for all that TC3 land. So once again, that was trying to speed things up. So the idea is, what we're aiming to do is, once the drilling program gets through an area, and we're going to talk about that tonight, the engineers will be able to quickly look at those drilling results and say, well, this person needs, a D9 type foundation. Here's that standard foundation design for a D9. I'll go off and, the builder knows how to build a D9, it'll get built. Waimak District Council will sign it off again, because a D9's a standard foundation. If we hadn't done that standard foundations, I'm making number, a D9, a D8, whatever you want to call them, then we would have had literally hundreds of different sort of foundation designs, and we think that also would have slowed things up as well. So we're trying to do things to speed things up, and I think one thing we've done really badly is when we've said, the standard foundation designs are coming out in April, when they did, everybody kind of expected the next day people would turn up and start being able to fix their houses. And it hasn't been like that. Some of you are probably now talking to your insurance companies about when you're going to get fixed. There's a few of you out there, because you told me as you came in the door. You're probably too shy to admit to everyone else around you. But we are now starting to see some progress, and people starting to get houses rebuilt, designs completed in TC3. Southern Response, which have taken over, if you like, the claims from AMI, they've got numbers of, in the TC3, they've got 187 properties across wider Canterbury. We're in the design and documentation stage. That is where they're talking to their customer about what it's going to be, and they're documenting it, and they're trying to get it fully designed. They've got something like 500 properties where they're with Arrow, who are their if you like, their project management office, going through the program, and other insurers are also winding things up. I just don't have all their numbers there as well. In terms of the whole insurance thing, I think some people have said, why haven't you sort of, what's the story with insurance? And I guess when we think about insurance at Sarah, is the first thing we think about is how we make sure we keep insurance long term. The insurance companies have, we've all paid them bucket loads of premiums over the last 50 years for some of you, but they've also paid out. They're also going to pay out large sums of money. And we wanted them to think that when they rebuild houses in Kaiapoi or in Christchurch or wherever, they're going to rebuild houses that were actually going to survive future shakes. We wanted them to have faith that we really were a first world country. We weren't some sort of banana republic where we just came up with things overnight and they built a house, and when the next shake happened, that house fell down. But also we're really aware that if we behave, that there's also a wider game of making sure we keep insurance going forward. And if they think we don't act responsibly, we don't come up with good quality building standards, we're not considered about drilling programs and those sort of things, we think there's a risk they'll say, actually, New Zealand, you're just too difficult to do business in, we don't like the risk, we'll go off and take our money elsewhere. So we can sort of win battles and we can win wars. And we think the wider war we want to win is working with the insurance industry to make sure they continue to offer you cover going forward. When Mr. Vero or Mr. IAGE or Mr. State Insurance pays you out or builds you a new house for $300,000, about 95 or 98% of that, so of that 300,000, maybe 260, 270, $280,000 of that doesn't come from your insurance company. It's come from your insurance company's reinsurer. A guy who lives in Zurich or Munich or the Cayman Islands, one of those places where none of us ever really go. It comes from those reinsurers, and it's been a key thing to make sure those reinsurers, who are really where the money comes from, were happy with what we're doing. And what we're seeing at the moment is those reinsurers have kept faith. So EQC, who are a big insurer, I know that because I talk to them a lot. Their reinsurance program of people offering them insurance has been successful, so they've got insurance they can then be more comfortable. But also, you also would have seen in this morning's paper, Westpac announcing they're working with Lumley with some reinsurers to offer new build cover for people who are building new houses. So we are seeing some really positive signs that that the reinsurers are going to stick with us and we're going to keep insurance going forward, whether in TC1, TC2 or TC3 land. The idea of coming up with things like foundation designs for TC3, the thing the engineers have worked really hard at being able to do was be able to design foundations that would go under houses where those engineers could look insurers and the insurers' technical experts absolutely in the eye and say this foundation will withstand a credible event going forward. So they're much stronger than they were because the likelihood of a big event is much more likely than it was before. You know, those pointy-head seismologists think a big quake is much more likely than it was going to happen. While they think it's much more likely, we all know it won't actually happen though. Well, that always gets a really big laugh in Christchurch. I don't know what it's about you guys. I was just trying to get that. So, I mean, the key point I'm trying to get across is, while you're all feeling really frustrated that it's going too slowly, what we're trying to do is put really good quality, if you like, foundations, principles in place to make sure you can be insured going forward. And if you're getting a new house, it will withstand future quakes. Can I go back? I'll go back over these slides. Now this bloody thing has locked up on me. Is it? It's going to sleep. There we go. Beautiful. So I think Simon covered that. I think Brent and Shirley Kenson, they came and they said they haven't been to a meeting since we had a red zone meeting. We're sorry about that. I think we've had something like 150 public meetings, Sarah, in the last 14 months. This meeting will also be up on our website either tomorrow or the next day. In terms of there's a video camera at the back and we're filming it. So if I speak too quickly or your neighbour wants to hear it or you've got a nephew who lives in Hong Kong or the Netherlands who you want them to have a look at it so they can tell you what really happened tonight, it will be up on our website tomorrow or the next day. So www.sarah.govt. Or you can just ring us up and we'll tell you how to find it on our website. And I got a hard time on the radio this morning for spending as much as we do on communications, but never mind. So why is my land in the technical category? These are some of the things I'm going to try and talk about. But first of all, just make sure that these are really difficult times for everybody, and there are lots of places where you can get good quality support within your community. There's the hub in Kaiapoi, which is, how do I describe where that is, Simon? Searle Street, and that's manned by earthquake support coordinators, but also a number of the insurance players are there as well. And they can sort of hold your hand and give you some advice and direction. If they can't help you, they can nearly always tell you where you can get good quality advice. So if you want to make enough time to go and see them, 0800 764 23 80 78. There are these earthquake support coordinators, which you can find at the hub, but you can also ring up and try and have one of those people come to your house. So they're 50 or 60 people paid for by the government, and their idea is, once again, they help people whose lives are difficult. trying to hold your hand and trying to make sure you get the support you needed. Accommodation support, we've got the people from CTAS here. Nikki is at the back there and she's going to wave. She's going to step forward and wave. But Nikki has got information about what accommodation support and finding accommodation, so she's paid for by the government as well. In terms of counselling support, there's another 0800 number there for people who just want to go straight to a counsellor. Because for a lot of people, you know, I'm waking at 4 in the morning at the moment, and time I went off and talked to someone about techniques to try and help me relax and sleep better and some of those sort of things. And those are the sort of things counsellors can help us with, as well as all those other worries we've got. But there's nothing wrong with sitting down and talking with someone when things are really difficult. So I'll talk about this quickly. So the roles and responsibilities, you know, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. Well, that certainly gets a laugh in Christchurch. So we have sort of overall responsibility for trying to coordinate the recovery, and we're the guys who've done the land zoning. I didn't personally do the land zoning. You know, we write papers for ministers, but those decisions are made within the cabinet room. The Department of Building and Housing, which Malcolm is from, and Malcolm will talk soon, they're the government agency that came up with the standard foundation designs. They're the guys who understand how to build houses, and they oversee all those sort of regulations. EQC, Brian is here from EQC, and he'll talk about some of those land issues, so you can throw those questions at me, but I'll probably put them on to Brian. Insurers, Dean is here, Dean will talk about that, and the council will talk about flooding, consents and some of that sort of stuff. Shall I talk quickly about why places became red? Do people want to hear this quickly? Some of you might, yeah. So the red zoning was about extensive and area-wide land damage, and is there anyone here from Brooklands, for example? No. They haven't all gone yet. Some of them are really keen to stay. But I mean, it's also in many cases we're going to have to build the land up and build big walls to stop lateral spread. So the walls you'd build to stop this lateral spread. So we all know what lateral spread is now, don't we? Yeah. You know, the walls you build to stop lateral spread aren't something, you know, the Kaiapoi North Scout group build, you know, over a series of weekends as a fundraiser. They're something, you know, major civil engineering companies build over long periods of time. So, you know, the closest example might be the one, they're doing some of these in Fitzgerald Ave. In that case, it's like a 10-metre wide stone wall that goes 10 or 15 metres deep, and they don't take 5 minutes to build. So it was building those sort of things to stop lateral spread was reasons areas went red. There was also some uncertainty about whether those sorts of engineering solutions would work, and we also thought those sort of repairs were going to be protracted. But one of the other key tests we put it to was without that area-wide remediation, we thought ongoing insurance cover for those people would be very difficult to get. There are some people who've gone red who've got less land damage than some people who are green. Because it's about your susceptibility to damage in a future quake. You know, Kaiapoi has been pretty close to these quakes, but not as close as some other areas. And our concern with some areas, we made them red because we felt if there was another quake close by, they'd be very likely to get significant land damage that would really badly damage houses. So the redness isn't just about land damage you can see now, it's how likely you are to get land damage in the future. So the green, which you are, means we think you can rebuild your houses with foundations where they will stand future quakes. The key thing is you can rebuild your house without some area-wide fix. In that red area, you had to do some area-wide thing. You had to build a massive wall, build up the land over a big area to actually stop the land damage causing real damage to your house. On green areas, we don't think that's the case. This is just this map about liquefaction. You can see Kaiapoi there from September, and then if we go to February, it's very similar actually, a very similar land. But you can see in Christchurch, it's just, you know, quite extraordinary the difference between the two events. So for you in September and you in February, you're actually, Mike Jack is here. How much closer were they here? Is Mike Jack here from Tonga? How much closer was Kaiapoi to the February than the September quake?
The level of shaking
So I don't know if people were here, that makes sense to people that were here, but yeah. But I guess I'm just trying to get across, this is this picture which just shows this liquefaction, trying to say that actually lots of areas of Christchurch had land damage. So this is the overall zoning. You can see the red areas that have gone red, including areas of Kaiapoi. The blue-green areas that you are in Kaiapoi. And then you've got those grey areas, which are those parts of further out, sort of Islington and those sort of places. Just in terms of, it's quite a bizarre statistic, but the area that's gone red is roughly, I think it's 4 times the area of Hagley Park. So it's actually a pretty big area. 4 times the area of Hagley Park. I had an American come and see me today from the US Embassy, and I told him it was twice the area of Central Park, which he didn't believe, but it's a very, very large area. Close-up of your area. And so you can see there's, do I need to tell you what you can see? I think you can see the different zones there as well. So these are the technical categories, TC1, TC2, TC3, and it's really about the process you need to go through before we can design a foundation. So just because you're TC3 doesn't mean you'll necessarily need a TC3 foundation. What we're saying is, if you're in a TC3 area though, someone needs to do some investigations near your house to determine whether your land is such that you will need one of these stronger TC3 foundations. And if you do need a TC3 foundation, what sort of foundation there is. We think there are foundation designs available for anyone on TC3 land. That's our view. And the Southern Response people think at the moment they've got foundation solutions for all but about 1 in 20 of their customers at the moment, and we want to work with them to find it for that other, for that 5% that they haven't got a foundation solution for at the moment. In general, if people have got a replacement policy, your insurer will be required to build you a replacement house on that land with whatever foundation design is required. The other thing I was going to say was, the Waimak District Council building inspector has always been your friend, but in many ways going forward he's even more, or she. Are there any female building inspectors? Yes? No? Simon says there are, so we'll say there are. What I'm trying to say is the building inspector is an independent person who's going to have to approve whatever happens to your foundation repair or your new foundation. It has to be signed off by an independent person like a building inspector. So if you're not happy with what the insurance company is doing for a repair, it is overseen by a building inspector. So offering the building inspector a cup of tea or a muffin when they come round, so you can have a longer conversation with them, is probably a good idea. I'm not trying to be silly here, but they are going to see a lot of foundation designs, and if they sign off a foundation for your house or a foundation repair, and they know if there's another earthquake in 5 years' time and that foundation falls apart, breaks in two, they know they are in serious trouble. So that whole thing about having building inspectors is a liability back on the council, and those guys want to make sure the right thing happens. I guess just generally about engineers at the moment, my overall concern with the engineers, they've got too careful and too conservative, if anything. They aren't actually signing off anything, they are actually being really careful at the moment. I think that's almost becoming a problem in some areas. So the key thing about being in a TC3 area before someone decides whether you need one of those stronger foundations is there's a drilling program. That drilling program is, there's various people with drilling programs going at the moment. They're working on coordinating them so they're not drilling on top of each other. Both EQC, the former AMI or Southern Response are out there drilling, and I know most of the other insurance companies are drilling as well. And there's a program to try and bring all that drilling information onto one single computer database, which means that a geotech engineer can go in that database and say, gee, the drilling result was a 7.2 at your house, it was a 7.3, 3 towards down, it was a 7. They can get a consistent picture of everything that's going on in the area. There was a land zoning review, which some of you I know participated in. We got an independent person in to run that, and some places did change colour. About 1,300 people applied to change colour, about 100 did change colour. And if you want to talk about, maybe if you want to talk about that afterwards, we're happy to talk to you about that after the meeting as well. So that's all I've got. And Simon, should I just hand over to
Brian.
To Brian. Thank you very much. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Yep. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much for taking your time to listen to me. I guess I better start off by asking who out there currently has a problem with EQC? Okay, this is called targeted marketing. So there's me, and we've got a small team here as well. I'm very happy to have a chat to you at the end of this, if you've got some questions of that I haven't been able to answer as part of this presentation. Okay. I'm going to cover a couple of things that are probably burning issues for people, a little bit about the drilling program, a little bit about something called apportionment. So have you guys heard about apportionment? Yep. Okay, so hopefully I'll be able to answer some of your questions in the presentation. Roger's touched on this, but I think to start with, it's really important to recognise that not every house in TC3 is going to require a TC3 foundation. Our estimates, and that's insurers and EQC, are that there's something like 27,000 homes in TC3 in general, of which, roughly speaking, a third don't have any foundation damage. So you're not going to require foundation repair. A rule of thumb that some councils are using at the moment is that if you've got less than 25% damage to your foundations, you won't require a TC3 foundation. But that's a rule of thumb, and sometimes an engineer is going to have a look at that to verify that. So we're really dealing with about a third of properties with more than about 25% damage to their foundations, where we're going to have to go through this investigation process for the foundation repairs. I think you know this far better than I do in terms of the number of events and the timelines around TC3, but I think it's worthwhile just remembering this or reminding ourselves of this. In June 2011, so last year in June, the green zone was established. So we went from being orange and white and red and green, so we had green and red. Then in October, the Department of Building and Housing TC guidelines, the technical categories, were announced. So that's October last year. So TC1, TC2 and TC3 were established. In December last year, the foundation guidelines that Roger talked about for TC1 and TC2 came out, and Malcolm, I'm sure, is going to touch on those later on. So we had foundation guidelines for TC1 and TC2 by about Christmas last year, but we didn't have anything for TC3. So we knew that there was going to be something happening with TC3. So we went out and we secured drilling rigs. Now, I don't want to sound flippant about these. These are quite technical rigs, and we grabbed as many as we could. They're generally used across the country for investigations of land. So we grabbed those in anticipation of having to do some sort of drilling program in terms of informing foundation design. So by March, we'd got, if Reed's here, I'm sure he can correct me, about 3 of them by March. We've currently got about 15. Yes, I'm sure somebody's going to ask me, well, why don't you get more? We're trying to find them. They're as scarce as hen's teeth, and the really scarce thing with the rigs are the people who know how to drive them. And I'll show you some examples of the data that comes out from the rigs later on in the presentation as well. If anybody out there can interpret that data, also talk to me at the end of the program, and we'll try and hire you, because I can't. So by about April 2012, so April this year, the TC3 foundation guidelines were released by DBH. So we knew what we were working to by that stage. And we'd started the drilling program. And if you look at there's a map over there next to the EQC table, and that'll show you where we are drilling, where we're marking out, and where we've finished drilling. And my understanding of today is that we have either finished the marking out in Kaiapoi and the first holes are being drilled, or else the first holes will be being drilled tomorrow. Okay? So Roger talked about the drilling programs. We've got ours, the insurers have got theirs as well. What we're trying to do is bring together a coordinated drilling program. And Roger touched on this, but the DBH guidelines talk about area-wide drilling. So if you think about I think at a 100-metre distance. So if you think about the length of a rugby field, 100 metres. If we drill at one end of the rugby field and then drill at the other end of the rugby field and pull out the core, sample, so the actual, what the data looks like and what the ground looks like, if it looks about the same at both ends of the rugby field, then there's a reasonable assumption that the ground is basically the same in between those 2 points. And that's what the area-wide drilling program is trying to do. In some cases, the sample might not come out the same. So we might have to think about drilling at the halfway line or drilling at the 22 to try and establish whether the ground conditions are uniform. Now, Roger's right, your building inspector's your friend, but the person who issues the consents at the Waimak District Council, that's the person you adopt. Okay, because they're the people who say, that interpretive data, we agree that we can sign off on the foundations based upon that data. So when we talk about the area-wide drilling program, we're really trying to say collectively, all of the insurers trying to grab as many rigs as we can we optimise where we drill those holes? So we're not drilling on top of each other, we're not drilling next to each other if at all possible. Sometimes we will have to because the ground conditions might be different or might change in between, you probably know this better than I do, even between neighbours. Yeah. So that's what the area-wide's about. If we can get that collaborative one going, we're going to get it done faster than if we did it individually. And that's the whole intent for it. Everybody's got their own programs going at the moment, so there is drilling happening. And as I say, if you look at the map, you'll see where we've been. So if we can do it collaboratively, based upon the number of holes that we think we have to drill, I think collectively, Dean, we should have this done by late 2015. There's quite a lot to drill. It really depends on a couple of things. Roger has touched on it. First of all is the ground conditions and the number of holes we have to drill per property. At the moment, the guidelines are on an area-wide basis, if we get, Malcolm, help me out here, is it about 6 per hectare? Yep. 6 per hectare, then that should satisfy the design needs. But if we have to go more holes than that, obviously it's going to be a little bit longer. So it really does depend on what we find as we go through the drilling program and look at the ground. Now, there's 2 types of drills that we're using. So have you heard of CPTs? Yeah, so cone penetrometer tests. We're basically trying to push what looks like the head of an arrow into the ground to see what the resistance of the ground's like. So that's one type. I'll show you some photos of these later on in the presentation. And the second type is just basically drilling boreholes. So you're taking a big slug of ground, of land, the strata of the ground coming out of the soil as well. We, as part of the general repair program with EQC, but also part of the drilling program as well, want to prioritise vulnerable people in the community. They're people you will know. Okay, they're likely to be either your friends, your family sometimes, or possibly your neighbours. So I'd also encourage you, we're working with other government agencies to try and identify the vulnerable communities, but if you know someone who you think we should be prioritising right here, right now, can you please come and talk to us at the end of this presentation as well? Okay. If we do come to drill, we're going to ring you. In general, we're going to try and drill on the berm outside your property, but if we have to come onto your land, we're going to ring you first and ask if we can come on. Okay? If we do, please say yes. If we can get the drilling done on an area-wide basis, it's going to be faster for all. So if we do ring, please say yes. If we think we can do it on the berm outside your property, you'll get a postcard from us in the letterbox saying, we've called round, you weren't at home, or this is when we're going to be in the area. When we do come, and if we do have to come onto your property to drill, you're going to see us take some photos. Why? Because if we have to shift the kids' trampoline or take down a fence to get the rig on, we want to put it back where it was. So if we're taking photos, it's so that we make good when we leave with the drill rig. This talks about SCIRT, which is the Christchurch City Council one, but you'd expect us, and we are doing what you'd expect us to do, which is coordinating with the Waimak District Council, their infrastructure renewal program. And I think I wouldn't mind taking the opportunity here to have a hat tip to the council. Their professionalism in the program that they've got and the way that they've worked with us since September 2010 has been, I think, quite astonishing. You should be very proud of the council and the work that they've done. So we are trying to do what you'd expect us to do, which is not drill into somebody's pipe. So we have to work with the local infrastructure renewal to make sure that we're not drilling where they've just put a pipe in, or digging up the road where they've just sealed it, or they're going to dig up the road where we're trying to drill. So try and get that coordination stuff that you'd expect happening. We've got just over 2,000 holes drilled to date, and in the map on the wall over there and in the newspaper you've got a timetable of us when we're going to be there. And as I say, as far as I'm aware, the drilling has either just started today or will be starting tomorrow here in Kaiapoi. Where are we? This is on the map. This is where we are at the moment. And you'll see Kaiapoi is mentioned there because we're here drilling. This is some attempt at sort of trying to give a sense of what the area-wide drilling program might look like. The main takeaways from this is if the ground conditions are uniform, not every property is going to be drilled. In some cases, if we prioritise a vulnerable homeowner, one of those little red triangles there might be where we first drill, and then we might try and go out 100 metres from there. Is it me determining where the rigs go? No. No, it's a geotechnical professional who's telling me this is where I think the drilling program should happen. Do you want me to go through the site investigation process? Can you read all that, or do you want me to talk to it? I mean, the first one looks like an ice cream truck, right? So I'm not sure it's going to be playing green sleeves as it comes down the road to do the drilling, but I think that first one, Mike, is that a CPT one? Yep. Thumbs up from the geotechs, that's the CPT rig on top. The bottom one's the borehole one. Okay, we'll mark out, we're going to check for services to make sure we don't drill through sewer pipes or water pipes or whatever. We'll do this, we'll do the drilling program, we'll put the property back, we'll put the fence back up, shift the trampoline if we need to. The data then gets loaded for interpretation. So Roger, being an engineer, knows a bit more about this than I do in terms of the process, but the data is taken by a geotechnical expert, interpreted, that's given to a structural engineer to do the design of the foundations. It's generally a bespoke foundation required, and therefore that goes through the consenting process with the council. And then either EQC or your private insurer, if we argue doing a repair of the property, then manages that repair on your behalf. That's what the output looks like. So can anybody here interpret that? I'm looking to recruit. So the one on the left looks a little bit like an ECG sort of heart monitor thing. Well, that's your CPT log. And the one on the right is something that only Mike Jacker can read on my behalf, I believe. So that's the output. Okay, drilling program has nothing to do with your land damage assessment. This is entirely about the foundation design for your property. Land damage assessments are quite different, quite separate. And that's going through the process of looking at what data we have in terms of the damage on your property. The repair or our obligation in terms of land and land insurance probably won't change the TC3 category. Our obligation is simply to take the land back to how it was prior to the event. So in our language, back to how it was on 3rd of September. We've started mailing out land damage information packs. Has anybody got one of them yet from here? Okay. Which consists of an aerial photo of your property with hand-drawn or hand-sketched damage assessment over the top of it, a brochure in terms of explaining what our land obligations are in terms of the insurance. If you remember the Stage 3 report, I don't hire marketers, obviously I need somebody to come up with a better name for it, but the Stage 3 report, which was area-wide damage for Greater Canterbury, which is on our website, at the end of that report there'll be a Kaiapoi section which talks about the land damage, the land changes in Kaiapoi. That's part of that land information pack. That's the first step. The second step then is to get a team out onto your land to measure the insured portion of the land. Okay, so we don't insure all of your section. Under our Act, we're in essence insuring the footprint of your house. Okay, so that's the footprint of your dwelling and the 8 metres around it, 60 metres, which is your access way. It's explained or attempted to explain in the brochure. Did it make it clear in the brochure what we covered? It did? Okay, well that's good. And so the assessment process will be rolling out to actually quantify the repair costs of the land, and our preference is to cash settle that, is to actually send you a cheque, or preferably, if you can send us your details, make an automatic payment into your account. Okay, we're not proposing to do the land repair. In many cases, it's the sort of thing that I think a rugby club's going to be making a lot of money over Christmas sort of doing fundraising on this. Some of it's going to be filling of cracks, undulations and slumping. If it's quite significant damage which may impact on the repair of the house, the insurers are going to notify us, or we'll notify the insurer. Apportionment. Any hissing? A little bit of hissing? Okay, apportionment and settlement. You've probably heard a little bit about apportionment. I'm going to try and explain what we do and why we do it. After the September earthquake, we thought that our cover the $100,000 for your house lasted for the lifetime of your policy. So most policies are annual. So the way that we thought our Act operated was that you had $100,000 for the period that your insurance policy was in place, which is generally a year. That was challenged, so the High Court ruled in, I think it was August 2011, that actually it's $100,000 per event. Now you guys know how many events you've had. I've got about 15 that I'm accepting insurance claims for through EQC at the moment. So we've got 15 events that we need to apportion damage to, and we being the insurance industry. Because the first 100,000 of that per event is EQC's liability. So the insurance sector as a whole needs to determine which event caused what damage. The other reason we need to do it, not only because of the declaratory judgment and because of the multiple events, is that like you, I have insurance, and Roger touched on that as well. So we have reinsurance. Like you, I pay an excess or a deductible on that. You don't want to pay mine. My deductible is $1.5 billion per event. So I have to pay the first $1.5 billion, then I have reinsurance that kicks in. I have 52 reinsurers. EQC is one of the largest reinsurance programs in the world. I have 52 reinsurers, all on different events and at different levels of cover. They need to be happy and satisfied, not down to the second decimal point, they're not being silly about it, that I have attributed the right amount of damage to the right event. Why? I'm trying to get something close to $4.5 to $4.7 billion off reinsurers. It's a big number, so that is more than Clayton's government or the current government spent on law and order in any given year in the last 20 years, I'd argue. It's a significant amount of money. The reason we have to do it is partly it's now the law under the declaratory judgment, and partly because if we want those reinsurers to underwrite New Zealand again, which will impact directly on the insurance that we all pay as homeowners, we need to get it as right as we can. What's the process we're going through? We're looking at the land information we've got, we're looking at the claims and the claims assessments that have been done by both EQC and insurers, and we're looking at patterns of damage. So who out there has a house that was lightly damaged, but all your neighbours were quite seriously damaged? Yeah? Who out there is the other way around? You were quite seriously damaged, but your neighbours were lightly damaged. So we're having to look at patterns of damage around properties to say what's the distribution of damage across those, and where we have those anomalies, have to look into that in quite a bit of detail. Not down to the nth degree and being silly about it either, but just to satisfy ourselves about the distribution of damage. How long is it going to take? I don't know. People are going to tell me it's taking too long, and I absolutely agree. But I don't know because I don't think it's ever been done anywhere in the world before. I don't think apportionment has been required of any insurer or any group of insurers in a country before, and if so, certainly not over what we're dealing with now, which is something like 700,000 individual claim components. Are we trying to do it fast? Yes, we are. For most of you who are under the EQC cap, so you're going to be managed by EQC in terms of your repairs, it doesn't make a blind jot of difference. It's something that my accountants are going to do in the back office, basically. It's not going to impact on you. For those of you out there who are saying, well, I'm not sure who's managing my claim, is it EQC or is it my insurer? That's where it makes a difference. And so you are the ones we're prioritising. So anything above 80,000, we are prioritising the apportionment of that. We've passed over to the insurers just under 10,000, over $80,000 claims we've apportioned and making a recommendation on settlement. And the insurer is going to come back to us and say, yeah, I agree with that, or I don't. So we've got 10,000 already, or just on 10,000 already passed over, and we're getting through, Reid, I think about 500 to 800 a week. So we're focused on the ones that are near cap or over cap and getting those out of the way so you get some certainty. That's just 14,000, but I think you've referred some back to us actually, Dean. So we are prioritising over the 80,000, and we think, and at the current rates, we're going to have all of that near cap, over cap done by 2013, by May that says, by May 2013. Okay, so how long is it going to take? I don't know. It's an intensely manual process. What we're trying to do is, through those patterns of damage that I was talking about before, whether or not we can get a statistical model, we can just run that right across all of the claims and have insurers and reinsurers say, yep, that distribution of damage looks about right for the 20,000 claims that we've put across. So are we sitting our hands doing it? No. I've got a team of somewhere between 70 and 80 people entirely dedicated to going through a manual process, looking at the damage around your property, your neighbour's property, and trying to figure out the patterns of damage for that. We've come out in Christmas last year and put some lines in the sand in terms of our repair program. Okay, so we're going to have all of our dwelling repairs, and particularly the over 50s, done within the end of next year, and our actual repair program done by the end of 2015. To give you an idea about the pace of that, this data is a little bit old, so it's 2 weeks old, so I apologise for that. Between Kaiapoi and Rangiora hubs, we've completed 4,579 complete repairs. That's about $58 million worth of repairs in Rangiora and about 52 million in Kaiapoi. So we've got about 110 million in terms of repairs into your local economy and about 4,500 houses already fixed. So we're chugging along, and we've made a commitment in terms of getting all of this done by the end of 2015. We're prioritising repairs for the vulnerable, so I do urge you, if you think there are people that we should be focusing on, please let us know. The land information packs that at least one of you have, we're rolling those out. And you should be receiving those, and we'll have those out by the end of the year across Canterbury. The TC3 drilling program, if we just do our own, will be gone by March 2013. If we do a collaborative one, which will be for the benefit of the entire community and slightly and help us do that sort of interpretive and area-wide drilling, that'll take by about 2014. We're going to have, and we're focusing on the apportionment of those over 80s. We're going to have that done by May 2013, so it's May next year. We've already put about 3.3 billion. So some of you might be thinking EQC is doing this because they want to hang on to their money. I've got a CFO who's amazingly wanting to just chuck money out the door. So 3.3 billion, we've been paying an average of $5 million a day since the 5th of September 2010. That's what it's up to. So those are our commitments to you. I know some of you have got issues with dealing with us, and I'm very, very happy to talk to you at the end of this, or if you've got questions, to take those after the next speaker. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Brian. Could I just take the opportunity to acknowledge Member of Parliament Kate Wilkinson. Last speaker before we have general question and answer, and that's Dean McGregor from representing the insurance perspective.
Thanks, Simon. As Simon said, I'm Dean McGregor. I work for IAG, but I'm speaking on behalf of all insurers tonight. So before I start, though, there are a number of insurers that are here because I can't, it wouldn't be practical for us to have all of the insurers present to you tonight. We wouldn't get you out of here before midnight. But so I know that we've got IAG representatives here tonight over at the insurer table there. So if you're insured through State, NZI, Lantern, or one of the bank businesses that we underwrite, then the team is there to answer questions for you at the end of the night. I know we also have Lumley and Tower represented here tonight, but I'm not sure if we've got anyone else. Perhaps you could call out if we've got any other insurers that are represented. Southern Response as well. Okay, so across in the other corner here, but I think around the insurance area at the end of the night, if you're looking for an insurer, you'll find most of them represented there. So, as I said, I'll be trying to touch on a number of general points around insurance, and I think Roger and Brian have already done an excellent job on a number of the key things that I'll also mention. But if we think about insurers in general, there's sort of at least 10 insurers in the market operating with insurance claims from the earthquakes and well over 100 different policies. So it's almost impossible for me to be able to give a definitive answer on any particular position, but I will certainly talk in general terms, and many of the things that I touch on will be relevant across any of the policies that you might hold. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, I'll probably move on to the... Oh, not sure if I'm going the wrong way here. Which is forward, Simon?
Yep, down.
Down, okay.
I couldn't work it either.
Here we are.
Excellent. So the first point was to touch on overcap assessments. So again, the critical thing here is that all insurers are responsible for any claim that is overcap, so over the $100,000, as Brian mentioned, from any single event. it's important that even if you've lodged a claim with EQC and you believe that your claim is over cap, it's important that you lodge a claim directly with your insurer. It's not automatic that your insurer will be made aware of it. So if you are aware that it's going to go over cap, or you believe that's the case, then you most definitely should be getting hold of your insurer to let them know and lodging a claim directly with them. Now that also applies to the items that are not covered under the EQC Act. So typically they're fences, driveways, paths, swimming pools, tennis courts. If you have one of those items that's damaged, then it's really important that you contact your insurer directly, because EQC doesn't provide cover for those items, and unless your insurer knows about that, then they're unlikely to be acting upon it. So in terms of approaches to assessment, rebuild programs and things like that, all insurers have different programs, and so while there's a lot of similarity, many of them are using project management offices and things like that, it is important that you stay in contact with your own insurer and understand what their approach is to your particular area. So, and that's sort of relevant especially when thinking about timing. So Roger passed me a paper earlier just around some of the insurers and the commitments that they've made around timing. So I think there's been a lot of speculation and a lot of reporting in the media around what timeframes are we looking at to get all of the properties repaired across the sort of Greater Canterbury area. Now, I know that there's been media reports and lots of suggestions that it could be anything up to 8 years, and I think Roger spent quite a bit of time trying to hunt out that insurer that said it was 8 years, because I don't think anyone's put their hand up and in fact said that. So, but I have got some of the insurers' commitments that are being made, so I'll read those out to you. And there's some that haven't yet sort of publicly stated what timeframes they're working to, but I would expect that they wouldn't be too far away. So IAG, so again that's NZI, State, Lantern, or particularly the bank business of BNZ or ASB, we are committing to completing our rebuilds and repairs on overcap properties by the end of 2015. Southern Response have made a commitment by the middle of 2016, so not too far apart, and those two organisations are relatively similar in size or the number of claims that they're managing. Vero are saying that, which includes AA, the latest start date for repairs or rebuilds over cap is 2015, and Tower is expecting to complete within 2 to 3 years and may have some outlying ones of up to 5 years. So you can see that there's a lot of similarity. There is certainly nothing in the range of 8 years or beyond, and I think what we can say is insurers in general have been spending a huge amount of time building what we call supply chains, so getting all the builders in place, all of the sub-trades, all of the engineers or specialists or architects or otherwise that are required to support rebuild programs like that. And I think it's fair to say that most of us are in a position that over the next sort of 2 to 3 months we would be expecting to communicate timeframes to customers around where you sit exactly on that time frame of those sort of 2 to 3 to 4 years in terms of the repair or rebuild process. Where are we? So timeframes for TC3. Roger touched on some that are occurring in TC3 right now. It's fair to say that insurers in general have been working across understanding the information of TC3, understanding the requirements of foundation damage, what the new foundations will need to look like, working with making sure that we've got the appropriate engineering resource on board. And so there are repairs and rebuilds that are now starting in TC3. I know our own organisation has 20 underway already. Now that's a low number compared to what we need to start with, but we have probably put emphasis into other areas of TC1 and TC2. I can say that, at least for IAG, we are well advanced on those areas, and in fact in terms of major repairs and rebuilds, we have most of those underway, or at least well into the design phase by now. So as we get into TC3, we are going to be able to commit a lot more of our resources to getting that work, in particular in the TC3 area, underway. I think timeframes is also critically important because what we've learnt through this process is engaging with customers and making sure that people are comfortable around what they're building, and and in designing a new home where I guess maybe 2 or 3 years ago you never contemplated that in fact you would ever need to think about this process. Working through that and building a new home, and we now have something like 500 underway, there's about a 42-week process from the time we first start that, talking to you about, what style of home do you want, what type of roof, what type of cladding, what type of door handles or taps or anything like that. It's a 42-week process from the time that conversation starts to the time we hand over the keys. So there's a long lead-in time, and if it's a major repair, so given that insurers are dealing with everything in terms of structural repairs, there's at least over 100,000, and as Brian touched on with the declaratory judgment, often the average is much higher than that because EQC is paying for some of those multiple caps of 100,000. So that's working out on average at about 38 weeks, is our experience at least at IAG. So there is a long lead-in time. So a lot of that work has to start well in advance of the end of 2015 or the middle of 2016. So to give you some indication. Ongoing insurance, so Roger touched on this and sort of the requirement to keep reinsurers around the world happy and confident really in what we're doing here. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to educate the reinsurers, explain to them actually why the foundation requirements in TC3 is a good thing, that it will make property resilient in the future. And in fact, if I look at the data that we now have from Canterbury in general, so whether it's flood data, whether it's ground elevation data, whether it's now going to be the geotechnical data, in fact, Christchurch and the Greater Canterbury will have some of the best data available in New Zealand, if not in the world, for managing risk. So there's nothing more that insurers or reinsurers like to analyse than data, and the more they can get, the more comfortable they become about being able to appropriately size that risk and provide cover in those circumstances. So I think the positive news is that all of the major insurers have remained committed to Canterbury. So there's there might be one or two very smaller players in the market that have looked to withdraw, but in the main, all of the major insurers have stayed and signalled their ongoing support of writing business here in Christchurch. One of the things that has been topical also is the availability of contract works insurance. So being able to get contract works insurance to be able to either manage a major rebuild or repair is critically important, because the standard home policy doesn't cover you in that situation when you're doing large structural changes or building a new home. So the message that all of the major insurance have been giving is if they're managing that repair process or managing it through their own project management office, there doesn't seem to be any problem with being able to get contract works insurance. I think all of them have arrangements in place for that, and as Roger touched on, Lumley are looking to expand into the market for some of new customers as well. So one of the key areas that I think is important, and I think Malcolm may touch on this as well, is the design of homes going into the future. So insurers will be looking for properties that really do meet the risk profile that we're looking for. So one of the things is about building properties that are appropriate for the conditions and the ground conditions. So the days of building sort of very heavy weight construction, so double brick or concrete tile roofs, really aren't sort of the ideal design for many of these places. So one thing I would encourage you to think about is, I see going into the future, and this is really just me speculating about how I see insurance advancing, is that those sorts of things will become factors that your insurance is rated on and priced on. So in the future, it's quite feasible to think that the detailed construction type of your home, linked with the type of ground conditions that you're on, will be part of the rating of insurance. So one thing about thinking about the affordability of insurance going into the future is to think about what you build today may in fact be what you end up paying insurance around in the future. So it's just insurance becomes more and more specific around some of the rating factors that are covered over the years. The area-wide drilling program, Brian has done an excellent job of explaining that. All of the main insurers are committed to working in the area-wide drilling program, and also we have an agreement at the moment where if EQC has data that is available or have drilled in areas that mean that we could get work underway, then we'll purchase that data directly from EQC. So The other thing to be aware of is that most of the insurers also have an independent drilling program operating outside of the area-wide program. So, and the key importance around that is we will always have customers who have a particular high priority need. So it really will be targeted at making sure that we are able to progress customers that need to move ahead faster. And that reminds me, I should also talk about the fact that all insurers are also working on a system where we try and identify the highest priority customers first. So, and generally speaking, that's people with uninhabitable homes, the elderly, those that may have health issues, or in some cases, there's some other factors like having young children in a family and things like that. So the area-wide drilling program is important. I think there's been quite a few concerns also about will my site be drilled, and so will there be specific data that's related to my site? Now, I think there's one of the concerns is are insurers looking for a cheaper or more cost-effective solution, as we like to say sometimes, in terms of being able to do less drilling. In fact, it's all about can we do it faster? That's the aim of the exercise, and it's not insurers that decide at the end of the day the density of drilling as to how many holes need to be drilled in any one particular location. It's very much down to the geotechnical engineers. They're the guys that know whether the data can be shared across sites, whether there's sufficient consistency across that data, and we will absolutely take our guidance from that. And at the end of the day, it will be the consenting people that make the decision around the appropriateness of the reports and the geotechnical information, and those structural design engineers that sign off on those foundation designs. So there's a number of key professionals and specialists that are involved in that process, and I think that should give you confidence that whatever the design is for those foundations, then they will be appropriate. In the main, most insurance policies will cover all of the costs of the professional fees, so whether that's the drilling costs, whether it's the geotechs who interpret and turn that data into a useful format, or the structural engineers who ultimately design the foundations. And the physical building costs of those foundations are generally covered under most replacement policies. If you have any doubts about that, then you need to talk directly to your insurer, but my understanding is across the industry that's pretty consistent that all insurers cover those costs. There's a number of claim settlement options that that you're probably aware of, but also it's worth touching on. So obviously, if your home is repairable, then there's a commitment from your insurers to repair that home. If you elected not to repair the home, or you didn't want your insurer to manage that repair, then you should talk to them about whether you have other options available. It might be that you have a neighbour or a brother or a cousin or a builder that you know and have access to. In most cases, insurers will be happy to work with those people, provided they can be satisfied that they have the appropriate qualifications and they'll work to the right standards. Rebuilding on the same site, so if your home isn't economic to repair, then you can rebuild on the same site, or you can rebuild on a different site. So if you decided that you wanted to move to a different location to be nearer family members, or you decided you didn't want to rebuild on a TC3 site, then most insurance policies will enable you to build on another site. Obviously, given that the insurer doesn't provide cover for the land, you would have to provide the site to build on, but it really doesn't make too much difference at the end of the day to the insurer whether we built on that site or another site. And another option is cash settlement. So if your home is uneconomic to repair, so it needs to be completely rebuilt, then again it's a conversation you need to have with your own insurer, but many insurers are now having those conversations with customers around if you don't want to rebuild, then generally the policy is that you get paid the indemnity value, which is defined by different policies in different ways, but generally speaking it's the market value of your property less the value of the land. But the key criteria of that usually is if you're intending to rebuild, or you've got a clear commitment to rebuild, then most insurers will talk to you about what's a fair settlement. And my encouragement was in that circumstance, you should be talking to your insurer, and the expectation if you're making a commitment to rebuild, then you should be expecting your insurer to pay that rebuild cost, even if it's in cash because you want to manage it yourself. And I would also encourage that not just your insurer, but you should be talking to other professionals around that as well to give you peace of mind around the offer that's being made by your insurer. Now, deed of assignment has also been an area that has caused a bit of contention and a lot of sort of media coverage at different times. Now, when we talk about deed of assignment in the insurance world, it's the ability to assign the outcome of the claim, and that applies where you might be selling the property. So if you decided that you've got a damaged property and you're going to sell it to somebody else, then that's a deed of assignment is what you do in terms of transferring the rights under your policy to somebody else after having purchased that home. Now, in many cases, insurers will allow you to assign the repair costs. However, in a number of other cases, different insurers have different approaches around this, but some say you can assign just the repair cost. The rebuild, the ability to rebuild or reinstate on the site is not assignable. That is a policy right that rests with you as the insured. Some insurers are saying that's the approach, some insurers are saying you can. So that's very much a question that you'll need to deal with your direct insurer on. And then lastly, the management of repair and rebuilding consents. And this is sort of the point that I touched on earlier, is the consenting process, regardless of what foundation requirements you require, will very much be handled by the local authority. So the Waimak District Council in this situation, the consenting officers are the guys at the end of the day who will give you the confidence around the type of repairs in terms of signing those off. The insurance process is very much about engaging the right professionals, so making sure that the geotechnical investigations are done correctly, that the right structural engineers are appointed to design the right foundations. But when that goes in for a consent with the Waimak District Council, then they're the guys that actually provide that level of governance or control check that says this is right and you should be satisfied that this is the appropriate foundation for you to build in this location. So we're working with the councils in that respect. For us, it's very much a case if we can put clean consents in and keep rebuilding and repairing as fast as possible, then that provides as limited interruption to any rebuild process as possible, and really that's the intent that we have as insurers, to be able to keep moving as fast as possible to be able to hit those targeted dates that I talked about earlier. So I'll be available to take questions, but as I say, I'll be able to speak in general terms, but more specifically, there are a number of insurers here that if you have specific questions around your own claim, that you should try and catch up with. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dean. Okay, so we've been going for a bit over an hour. I do want to give you the opportunity for questions and answers on the presentations that you've heard. We've got two microphones, Michael and Katie. Sorry. Hi. Questions of any of our speakers, and we'll just take it from one side of the room to the other. Any questions at this stage? Sir.
Just a clarification, please, around who is paying for drilling. Will EQC be paying for both under cap and over cap properties? Will they be paying for the drilling in both, or only for properties that are under cap?
It's fairly standard with any cost associated with a claim. So if it's under cap, all of the costs would be met by EQC. As soon as that claim goes to an over cap claim, then it's an insurer cost. So sometimes that'll sort of flick over depending on what happens during the process. We have what we call a wash-up protocol with EQC, so essentially that should be able to happen behind the scenes. It shouldn't delay things. If your claim was $95,000 estimated cost and it ended up blowing out to 110, then we would just manage that with EQC to make sure that the progress was maintained. But generally speaking, if it's under cap, the drilling costs and the geotech costs are EQC's. If it's over cap, it's your private insurer.
Can I ask, therefore, if it's over cap and the insurer is going to do that, that presumably comes out of, that's charged against what we're going to get in insurance for the property, is that right?
That's correct. Most policies are replacement policies, and it would be, so it wouldn't limit the cost of, or sort of, if you had a sum insured policy, then that might be a different scenario. But most policies are based on square metres and sort of the total size of the home, and that would be a cost that would be incurred in establishing the design requirements for the home. So it wouldn't necessarily limit what you could build.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wonder. I'm not sure who can answer this, but a TC2 property which has had one lot of drilling done, which has come up inconclusive. The insurance company decided to do another drill, and when inquired at Arrow the results of those tests, what was told was that it could be up to anything to $120,000 for a foundation for your property, and it may be uneconomical to build where you are now. Would someone like to comment on that?
So I assume you mean it was a TC3, not you called it TC2?
TC2, definitely.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, that doesn't quite make sense to me. What I was going to say was the overall point, though, is that if it's most policies, if you've got a replacement policy to require the insurer to rebuild on that land, almost regardless of what the cost of the foundation is. So if the foundation is going to cost $100,000, then the insurer is required to actually, under your policy to do that, you need to get legal advice around that.
Okay,
but that sounds like a really, 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 really expensive foundation for TC2.
Well, according to Arrow, that was the response that was given.
Okay, yeah.
Neville, I'm wondering if the Southern Response representative you can talk to them afterwards about that. Katie.
This may be covered in the next presentation, but just can someone elaborate on the 1 in 20 people that have got a land that a foundation solution is not suitable for, the ones that have come out?
So, yeah, I mean, what I said was, so the work so far Southern Response have done, they've found about 1 in 20 of them, they haven't got a response they like. We think a foundation design exists, but they just haven't decided they want to use it yet. So our view is there is a foundation design yet, but Southern Response are just hesitating, especially so it's really near a river or something like that, where they're just a bit more difficult to do. So, okay.
Is there a time frame around this, or
well, why don't I get Malcolm to talk about that in his presentation, because he's the man from the Department of Building Housing.
Yeah, you had a time frame for drilling undercap properties. What about the overcap? What's the story with drilling of those? You're going to get attacked here.
Yeah. Partly if we get the area-wide one, I was trying to explain before, and all of the insurers participate, and we can do that 100 metres, then it looks like March 2014. But for the overcap, it's not EQC that's going to be leading necessarily that drilling on the individual properties. So, do you want to add anything else to that?
Well, just to reiterate the point that all insurers also have a program that is, or a drilling program that's operating outside of the area-wide program as well. So generally speaking, that's where we're going to try and use that around priority needs cases, so uninhabitable homes, elderly, people with illnesses, people that need to be able to move on with their lives a bit faster. And I know that everybody probably feels like that's the situation, but unfortunately there's a need to prioritise some people through that process. So so all insurers will say will have an independent program. There's also a need, if the area-wide program goes through and does sort of the 100 metres apart, then in some cases geotechs will find actually there wasn't quite the level of consistency that was there, and then we'll have to go back and do some infill drilling as well. So there's a need for us to have programs that can do that as well. So 2014 is the end date, but also in the conversations that we've had, we've started to talk about how can we build up the resources faster. Now you can in many cases get the rigs, but you can't get the people that can interpret all the information and do it, or the technicians that do all that work. So a lot of work is going in to try and expand that at the moment.
Thanks, Dean. Brian, just one more comment, I think, on timing of the undercap drilling program out here.
Yeah, I was just checking with those who've got calluses on their hands rather than me who've got sort of a writer's hands. But we've finished the marking out. There's either the first rig's pushing a hole today or it's starting tomorrow. And the advice I've got, it's going to be slightly moderated in terms of the number of properties we might end up doing, but we think we'll have our undercaps. Was a gentleman asking about the undercap? Yeah.
Yep.
By December, I think, this year. Oh,
That's, the overcap is, as Dean was talking to, and I think that's 2014. Okay, other questions at the back?
Hi, just a question. I have got my insurance and they're covering my driveway, which is fine. And then I got one of your land packs and I'm just a bit confused because I'm not too sure, is the insurance still covering my driveway or are you guys covering my bad land or...
Yeah, welcome to the vague world of insurance law and EQC's Act. This is really bizarre. Dean will cover what's on top of your driveway. I'll cover the land underneath it. It's yeah. Welcome. Feel my pain. Welcome to my world. Yeah.
So you both work together.
Yes.
We hope so. Katie.
If your collaborative drilling program is so great, why have we been waiting for 9 months for it to start? And can you please confirm whether or not everybody has bought into that program?
Partly we started our drilling program in March, so EQC started our drilling program in March. We invited insurers in March to participate, and we've got an agreement in principle, but I've still got to get some ink on the contract. There's our drilling program, there's the individual drilling programs that the insurers have got, and it makes sense that we can collaborate on them in terms of speed.
How long do we have to wait because this is holding up our recovery?
Well, I'm drilling right here now.
At the back, and then we'll come to the front here.
Yeah, two questions. Firstly, being TC3, I'm still waiting on second assessment from February. I've been told that until the drilling is done, I won't have my second assessment done, which just seems to be prolonging the pain. And secondly, I've rung the banks up to remortgage basically, and they've all just spun around and laughed at me saying, well, you're TC3, no one's going to look at us. Is there something being done with these banks to try and get us in a position where we can move forward, please?
Sarah, I'm thinking the specific nature of your question. Can we ask you to talk to the EQC folk at the end of the presentations? Because I think that's going to be the best way to get an answer to you. Okay?
Sorry, can I just... and also, is it overcap from the first assessment?
First one they've said it's up to 100,000.
Right, so might be just, I don't want to hog all this, maybe it's a conversation that we have, but also with your insurer, because if it's overcap from that first one, then it should be passing on to your insurer. So can we talk at the end of this?
Thanks very much for that. Katie.
Hi, it seems that two of the key bottlenecks that are slowing action for getting some movement on our claims seem to be apportionment and the drilling program. And I just want to ask what steps are being taken to try and speed those two key areas up, because we're just getting nowhere at the moment.
So for apportionment, I've got somewhere between 70 to 80 people focused on it on the 80k and above. I've got 10,000 claims that my organisation believes have been apportioned appropriately and correctly. They've been passed on to insurers. We think there might be another 10,000 to do. So we're halfway through that program and we're getting through about 500 to 800 a week. And as I said before, I honestly don't know how long it will take, but that's the process I've got going at the moment on that. On the drilling, insurers have got their own programs, we've got ours. Are you an EQC customer in terms of drilling, or do you know if you're overcap or undercap?
Well, we haven't had any answers to that, no.
Okay, so do you want to talk to me at the end of this so I can take your details to have a look at that claim?
Is things like with the number of people working on the apportionment now, just a quick calculation, there's at least 40 weeks to get through what you've got ahead of you now. That's 40 weeks where people get no action, particularly those at the very end of that. As far as drill rigs go, has anyone bought drill rigs in from Australia?
Yep. Absolutely, yep. So in terms of looking for drill rigs, I'm looking anywhere, basically, we can get them. You probably know Aussies pretty lucky in terms of they can drill something in the ground and find something they can export, so they tend to be used pretty often. But we are looking there and also anywhere else we can find them, basically, the more we can get in, because that's one critical constraint. On the apportionment stuff, partly we've got a space problem. I can't find space to put people to do some of the apportionment work, and we've got insurers also funding some of the apportionment work that's going on as well. So we've got dedicated teams for some of the insurers to get through their claims as well. But I agree with you, it is a bottleneck, and I certainly would not disagree with that.
Okay, I'm going to take a couple more questions in this segment, and then we'll have a short break, a minute or two, a stretch, and then remember we've got 3 more presentations to come. At the back.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering with the TC3 land, when the drilling process is complete, because our land's already, we've already settled with our insurance company and we're waiting for the geotech report to rebuild on the land. Will that information be held back and released all at once, or will it be released as the land is being assessed so we can start rebuilding on it? Because we're still paying rates on the land. And we can't actually rebuild or do anything with it.
So the question is, was the drilling information released as it's done?
Will the drilling information be released as it's done, or is it going to be released all at once at the end of the drilling process?
So when the drilling for your foundations is done, the information is handed straight over to the engineers, and it's also going on this database that Roger spoke about, so that if we get the data sharing, I'll know the data from your drilling program, and then if I'm 100 metres down the road, your engineer will know the results of my drilling program down there as well, so they can share the data.
So if we can get that information, so we can access that information as soon as it's done, can we?
It's not as soon as it's done in terms of there's a, you know what I mean? Yeah.
So as soon as it becomes available, we have access to it and we can start rebuilding?
Certainly the engineers, your insurers' engineers, the ones who actually do all the stuff that is like witchcraft as far as I'm concerned in terms of interpreting it, yeah, they've got it, they've got access to it. And you should certainly ask your insurer to provide that to you.
Any more questions? Okay, can I make this the last one in this segment, and then we'll just have that short break.
Just a quick question, and essentially it was with regard to the EQC cash settlement on the land damage. Will that money not be required by the insurance companies to actually remediate the land and also to do foundation work?
We've just had the land damage, your entitlement from my organisation for land cover is yours. I can only cash settle you or your lender. The work that the insurers, either I as an insurer or Dean and the other insurers are doing with respect to the foundations are part of your dwelling. So all those costs fall on your dwelling cover. Does that make sense?
I just wanted to clarify a point on that as well. The only time I think that there would be a requirement of the money paid by EQC for the land settlement to be contributed towards foundation costs is if in building the foundations, and a good example is flood risk, so if the foundations were to be built up to a higher level rather than building the land up, then there may be a requirement to contribute some of that or all of that money towards those foundation costs. So, but that very much needs to be worked out on an individual site basis with you as a customer.
All right, thank you very much. We'll just a stretch, 1 to 2 minutes, but no more, please, because we still have quite a bit to go through. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name's Malcolm. I'm from Building and Housing. We're part of a larger ministry, a government agency that regulates the building and construction sector in New Zealand. So we set the standards, we write and maintain the building code, and then regulate the builders and the designers and the architects and the likes. Look, briefly tonight I want to cover off a couple of things. I just want to talk about what the technical categories, what they are and what they are not. I want to talk about how we came up with them, so some of the criteria that was developed around coming up, particularly TC3, and talk about some of the technical solutions, the foundation solutions and what they are. So look, as Roger mentioned earlier, this was all about getting a good starting point to repair and reconstruct buildings. When we looked at the amount of land and building damage across the Greater Christchurch area, it was clear that we had a lot of buildings. We had different variable land and different types of building damage and foundation damage. And we have a scarce resource of geotechnical and structural engineers, both in New Zealand and internationally. So we took a very sort of a triage approach, and we decided that we could do area-wide assessments, and we could slice up the area into 3 categories, and we called them 1, 2 and 3, no less. And that's about getting our engineering resource directed where it adds the most value, and that's into properties that have been classified as TC3, Technical Category 3, where there's more severe damage and or land conditions warrant that further investigation. It's really important to understand that technical categories are not a land zoning or a hazard map. They are a form of guidance around the level of site investigation, the level of geotechnical investigation into the site that's necessary to then work out what type of foundations are going to be needed, if you're repairing foundations or rebuilding new houses. And there are also a whole bunch of technical solutions about how we rebuild foundations. So it's guidance on the level of geotech investigation and then some technical solutions to how to fix buildings and their foundations. By taking that triage approach that I talked about, we have been able to free up about 80% of our residential housing stock in the Greater Christchurch area, and those folk in TC1 and 2 areas have been able to progress on, work through their insurance processes and get some of those repairs and rebuilds underway. So what were some of the criteria that we used to develop, to categorise properties as TC3? Well, it was based on area-wide geotechnical investigations. Geotech engineers have been undertaking investigations for almost 2 years now, certainly after the September earthquake and then after every major earthquake. An awful lot of investigation has been playing out over the last number of months and years. And that's picked up a bit of a picture around the areas, but it has been area-wide geotechnical assessments. And we've been able to look at damage that's been caused by the earthquakes, so observed damage to both buildings and then also to land damage. And then it's been talked about the LiDAR tests or surveys. That's the plane that has a laser and measures the land and whether it's sunk or risen in certain areas. So that's also gone into mix. So by taking a whole lot of information and putting it all together, we've been able to come up with a judgment around how the land is expected to perform in future should we have another significant earthquake, which Roger tells me we're not going to have, so that's all good. But it's important that you appreciate this is about building for the future, and it's about protecting your houses and making them as resilient as we possibly can should we have any future earthquakes of a significant nature. So there are plenty of people in TC3 classified properties who say, look, I didn't see any liquefaction on my site, or I don't have, a whole lot of damage to my property. Why am I TC3? And we have to explain it's about what's underground, and it's about how your building is likely to perform in a future earthquake. And simply, this is just about making an investment in your property. It's about building it right so that it's around for a long time to come. So undertaking geotechnical assessments and then having structural engineers design foundations isn't new in New Zealand. It's pretty standard. It's business as usual for the building and construction sector every day in New Zealand. It's new for Christchurch on the flat areas and Greater Christchurch area in Kaiapoi, and it's new on this sort of scale and size. But geotechnical engineering assessments are undertaken every day in New Zealand, and then that information is interpreted and structural engineers design foundations to suit ground conditions. It's been quite common in large parts of Auckland where they have expansive clays, and so this geotech assessment and structural engineering foundations is very common in Auckland. Areas where there's peat and marsh and bogland areas around Christchurch as well. And the Port Hills for many years have required structural engineers to design foundations because of the ground and soil conditions and the topography of those Port Hills. So I guess we're sort of saying this is a well-tested method of construction, and it's certainly not new. In terms of technical solutions, we've had a whole bunch of very specialist structural and geotechnical engineers working away since some of the earlier quakes, and they've come up with a lot of technical solutions for how to fix houses. As Roger mentioned, we knew early on that we wanted to get some efficiencies into the system. We didn't want bespoke solutions for every situation and engineers having to start from a blank page and work it out for every individual job that needed a repair to a foundation or a new house to be built. So we got a whole bunch of really specialist engineers together. We call them the Engineering Advisory Group, and they developed a lot of technical solutions, and that got peer reviewed and domestically and internationally, which gave us the confidence to produce a lot of the technical guidance that we've done to date. And our website's full of lots of technical solutions and guidance documents, pretty dry, heavy reading. It's for the engineers, not for the light-hearted, but it's about helping them to make good professional judgments around what's the right foundation solution for your property. There's been a little bit of talk about the weight of buildings, houses, and lighter weight claddings, and roofing and wall materials, and we just want to talk a little bit about that for a while. A lesson from the February earthquake was that houses that had lighter weight claddings, such as timber weatherboard or fibre cement or plywood, they performed, generally speaking, much better than those with heavier weight claddings, such as brick veneer or concrete masonry and concrete tile roofs or clay tiled roofs. So unashamedly, Building and Housing are trying to encourage people to have a think about if they're building new houses or they're having to do major repair jobs to foundations on their existing house, have a think about those lighter weight claddings. You're going to start to get questions from your project management officers that are working for insurers around asking you to consider those. And so, again, it's about building your houses to be as resilient as they possibly can be in future. The heavier your house, through the heavier the claddings, the stronger your foundations need to be in order to behave well on ground that's not ideal in a future significant earthquake. And in terms of what the stuff looks like, sometimes we get questions. Well, is it cheap and inferior, and is it the insurer just trying to take a less expensive solution for me? And we kind of say no, it's not. There's absolutely, certainly a lot of different lightweight claddings that are durable, desirable, look attractive, and will be absolutely fit for purpose, and again more resilient in a future earthquake. And a good old example is the old timber weatherboard that we've had in New Zealand for 150 odd years. It's certainly proved itself and performed very well through these earthquakes, generally speaking. So in terms of different types of foundation solutions, those bunch of engineers that I talked about have done a lot of work and come up with about 3 specific solutions, and I'll run through these very quickly. But deep pile foundations, site ground improvements, and shallow surface structures. When I say 3 solutions, it's not a sort of off-the-shelf, one-size-fits-all approach. It does require the geotechnical engineer to have done those investigations on or near your property and have determined the ground conditions, and the 2 engineers, the geotech and the structural engineer, work together to develop which of these solutions might be appropriate for your site. So let's just jump into these. Deep piles. Not new at all. Again, another very well tried building practice in New Zealand. In TC3 properties, typically there's a thinner crust, and the crust is the term we use to describe the top layer of earth that often foundations are bedded into. So in TC3 classified properties, you often have a thinner crust, and there might be a layer below that of liquefiable land or soil or earth that's prone to liquefaction when it gets the violent shaking that we sometimes have in these big earthquakes. So this concept here is really just about putting deep piles down past all of that, getting down until we find good, firm, strong bearing soil, ground and earth that can take the load of the house. This will be probably a popular solution for houses that have a complex design in terms of different shapes and wings and outcrops of different parts of building shapes, and those that have heavier weight claddings. Now, we're not saying you can't build with heavy weight, we're just saying you'll need to build foundations to suit, and deep piles will likely be one of the solutions for heavier weight. They are expensive, of course. When you have to drill down and pour concrete and put steel down, it does get more expensive than not having to do that. Deep piles will be suitable in a number of situations and they won't be in others. And what we've worked out to date is that in areas that are prone to lateral spread, where the land's moved horizontally, such as around waterways, deep pile solutions possibly will not be the most ideal solution because they'll take a lot of strain and pressure should there be lateral spread again in future. So, you know, it's not the right design for lateral spread areas. Ground improvements. The concept here is really about digging down and scraping out a big chunk of the land underneath your building platform, up to 2 metres, and replacing that with compacted hard fill and sometimes injected with cement, and really creating a very solid building platform in which to build a house, often with TC2 foundations, back on top of that really solid building platform. This is not common in New Zealand in the residential housing space, but has been well used in large civil engineering roading projects such as highways and rail bridges, rail tracks and the like. So it's certainly had its experience and proven to work. This was one of the solutions that we tested out of the QE2 Park. Some of you may have heard of the testing that we did out there, where we simulated earthquakes. We built a whole lot of these sort of foundation solutions, simulated the earthquakes, and were able to test how well they behaved. And then we had the real earthquake of 23rd of December, which gave them a big shake-up as well, and proved they were pretty resilient. As I say, these ones here stay fairly shallow to the ground and don't bury down like piles do. This is, we've got solutions for both repairs and rebuilds, and this is one of those solutions for repairs. A lot of old housing stock in Greater Christchurch that has timber piles, timber or concrete piles, a lot of old bungalows and villas, and these can be re-levelled and repaired. And this is just some of the pictures around that. In some of these solutions, we put a plywood skirt around the foundation. So if you've got timber pile foundations, we wrap that with a ply skirt, and that helps hold it all together and braces it very well. And we've trialled one of these out at Rafiti Domain in New Brighton, where we've built a temporary village, and we've put some plywood skirts around one of those units there to see how it all works and to cost it as well. And this is another solution here. It's around having a shallow foundation, often called a raft, because they kind of sit across the land rather than bury themselves deep in it, and it's strong and holds together. And the concept here is really because it's shallow and sits more on top of the land rather than in it, the foundation rides out any large future significant earthquakes, holds together, doesn't break up like some of the foundations did that were old, and can be easily re-levelled and connected up to services that might have broken away, such as power, water, sewer, but you're away sort of inhabiting that building again very quickly. So just very briefly to summarise, TC2 or TC3, sorry, and technical categories are really just guidance around the level of geotechnical investigation and technical solutions for foundations. They are not a hazard category or a hazard map. And technical categories generally only apply to the flat areas. So again, if you're in a hill site, which doesn't apply out here, then you're not a technical category. We've got a whole bunch of fact sheets at the back of the room. I'd encourage you to take these away and have a bit of a read about the technical categories, and I'm available later for questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Malcolm. My name's Nick Harrison. I'm with the planning and regulatory side of the council. Look, tonight I just want to talk briefly on building consents, land information memorandum, and rates remission. Building consents, you would have heard tonight from Roger, Brian and Dean just on rate of work, how far they've progressed, that sort of thing. I think we're all seeing quite a bit of progress now out in Waimakariri. House or new house builds have really taken off, and we can all see this out at Sovereign Palm, Sovereign Lakes, out around Rangiora, and soon we'll see it around the Silverstream development as well. Over the past 12 months, the council's handled over 900 new dwelling consents. That's, in context, we have an average over the last 10 years of about 450 a year, so we're well on twice of that rate. Just for comparison with some of the bigger metros around New Zealand, Wellington has about 600 a year, Hamilton about 750, Tauranga about 720. So it just gives you a scope and a scale of what's going on right now in Waimakariri. And from our point of view, it just looks like it's going to continue on for quite a while yet. So the council, in appreciating this, has put some strategies in place just to try and cope with it. And some of these I'll just quickly outline. We're working with your insurers' PMOs, the project management people and the insurance officers, just so we can get a good grasp on the work which is ahead of us, so we can timetable our resources. The council's also increased the staffing in the building unit. We've increased the number of contract processors. We've got about 6 or 8 additional ones spread around the country. That's on top of about the 8 processors we have in the council itself. We've hired additional inspectors, and those inspectors are also doing Saturday work just to try and get this whole throughput going through as quickly as possible. We've also talked with the major housing companies, and a lot of these ones are the ones involved in doing all the major rebuilds in these new developments. We've talked with them about streamlining the consent process. Our processors have gone out, met with their designers, trying to make their systems and our systems align as closely as possible, so when their building consent comes into the council offices, everything we expect is there and to the right degree, and it goes through the system as quickly as possible with minimal input from us, we hope. The other thing the council's also moved to is electronic processing. This is to try and get rid of the whole reams of paper involved in this bureaucratic process. This reduces the admin load. It helps processors just handle one document on their screen and not having to sign off multiple documents. We hope over the next 12 months this will also go right through to the building site, where the inspector will come out into the site essentially with something like a tablet, and will be able to assess what he sees, sign off the documents, and that'll be emailed off to the builder, to the insurance and to the owner, all straight away. While these are mostly useful strategies for new builds, we can also see these coming through for some of the major repairs as well, particularly in the TC3 land. Although there is one caveat with that, and that a lot of these repairs are going to be relatively unique. Going to be unique to the individual owner needs, they're going to be unique to the land treatment, and also unique to the particular building design. I think one key thing to take away for TC3 matters in the council tonight, oops, big thumb, is that if the building design fits the land, it will get a building consent. The test for the council in terms of the building design fits the land is we're going to want to see an appropriate sign-off by a suitably qualified person for the geotech assessment, in other words, chartered professional engineer with geotech in his experience, and associated with that an appropriate sign-off by a structural engineer, another chartered professional engineer, for the foundation design to go with that. I just want to talk briefly on land information memorandums. I think you'll be largely familiar with these. These are the report you get from the council when, say, you're seeking to buy a house, and the land information memorandum, or the LIM, will tell in that report everything the council knows or holds on that particular property. So it talks about the building consents for that property, the resource consents for that property. It also talks about resource consents around that property on adjacent properties which might affect that property. And the council is obliged to pass on that information that it holds about the property. This also means that the council will pass on information it holds about the land classification TC1, 2 or 3 for that property. And the way the council does that currently on the LIMs is to reference in the LIM to the SERA website, and it's up there, the landcheck.org.nz. So people gaining that LIM can check the most up-to-date, the most recent and clear information that is held, and that's held on that website, and satisfy themselves as to what they want to do with that. And lastly, I just want to talk on rates remissions. Rates remissions, the council passed this policy, I think it was about the middle of last year, and they're available to red and green zone ratepayers where they've had to vacate their land or their house because it's become uninhabitable. the policy treats the land as though it's bare land. It treats the land as though there are no structures on it. So some rates still apply, as they do to bare land around the district, but rates for sewer and water, rubbish collection, community services such as the pool and library, and also rates for Canterbury Museum are all remitted in this. Criteria to gain access to the rates remission are that an inspector or an engineer has classified the building as dangerous or unsanitary and uninhabitable, or it's been dangerous or uninhabitable by an EQC or an insurance agent, or residents have had to move out for an extended period because of major land remediation which is going on their property. The remission applies as soon as the house meets the criteria and the house is unoccupied. Application forms for the remissions are available at the service centre in Kaiapoi and in Rangiora, and the form is quite clear and it lists the criteria that you need to meet to gain a remission and what you need to do. So far the council's, I think, remitted in the order of 350 to 400 properties for rates. I suggest if you want to go down this path, hop into the service centre and talk to the staff, or else make an appointment and talk to them, and or perhaps talk to the rates officers. Look, that's all I want to talk about tonight. It was just briefly on building consent process, briefly on limbs, and also on rate remission. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nick. Okay, so we'll take questions on those two presentations, and any geotechnical questions, Mike Jacker from Tonkin and Taylor, who's coming up, will be able to answer those. Questions, please. Ma'am.
A TC3 property that has had under $10,000 paid for cosmetic damage from EQC, that has no foundation damage and has an independent builder's report to qualify that, cannot be sold because no lending institution will lend on the property because it's TC3. Why?
So we've been working really hard, talking to all, if you like, the people that influence banks to try and get them to understand more about TC3. So we've had seminars for real estate agents, for valuers, and also for the banks to start make them talk about these sorts of issues. We think it's simply taking those institutions a period of time to understand what it means. One of my staff who moved down from Wellington, he went out to try and buy a TC3 property the other day. Was a relatively light TC3 house, didn't have that much damage, and he found the bank was actually very happy to lend up to the normal, the level that was lending in, other areas around Christchurch as well. And that property went for a lot more than what he expected to go for, and he was unsuccessful in buying it. So it is a focus for us to try and make sure the banks have got confidence to lend against TC3 land. We have seen some changes in ratios for some areas, but we think it's just going to take them a while for them to get their mind around it, because they've just had a really big shock with these earthquakes. But it's something which is very much on my radar, making sure the banks keep confidence that they'll continue to lend against that land. I think you've seen the thing that came out yesterday, with Lumley and Westpac as an example of that. So Westpac are clearly saying that they will also lend against TC3 land.
The insurance isn't a problem. The insurance can be transferred over. The problem is the banks are saying, even with the builder's report, the EQC scope report, we will not lend on this property because it's TC3.
So
they're requiring much higher deposit, and they just will not lend on it.
So, no, look, I think that I'm saying I'm concerned about that, which is why we're trying to get them more comfortable at what TC3 land means, and the fact that if houses that are on TC3 land that have performed extremely well so far are likely to also probably perform well in the future as well.
Katie, any questions? Ma'am.
So I think you had one earlier that Malcolm was going to address.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's been answered or not, but the other question I had Craig for the District Council. The timing for building consents, is it the same for TC1, 2 and 3? And roughly what is it?
Yes. It is. We don't particularly differentiate on TC1, 2 or 3 for consents. I think on average at the moment we're putting consents through in about 15 working days. That's Monday to Friday days. Probably even going to come down a little bit on that.
Any more questions? All right. Oh, okay.
Sorry, this is a question for the representative from EQC. I just wonder, do you have in your database any idea of the number of people who got totally confused in lodging earthquake claims because of all the successive events, thought that one claim was sufficient, realised because of all the confusion over assessment work and potentially getting close to the cap, that then the Earthquake Commission advised the insurance company before they advised the homeowner. The homeowner then assumed they were over the cap, found out later who hadn't lodged potentially a claim in time, in the 3-month time process for June, because they thought they were over cap, and with all the confusion that went on, that then they then subsequently lodged a claim, which may have been outside the time frame, and now those claims lodged outside the time frame are being denied by EQC. Have you kept a record of how many have occurred like that, particularly with elderly people in Christchurch who also aren't as IT literate as potentially some of the younger ones are?
I don't know how many people that would affect. I do know that on average we've got 2.4 to 3 claims per property, and what we're doing is, if you've lodged, for example, a lot of people lodge contents claims. So they may not have thought about their house, they might have just thought actually some more contents damage has been done. So we're finding quite a lot of contents claims being lodged for the various events. And so what we're doing is saying, well, if you've lodged a contents claim with us, or if you've lodged a building claim with us, or if you've lodged a land claim for us for one of those events, we'll open the corresponding bit. So a good example might be a lot of people after June, for the June quake, lodged just contents claims. I'm thinking perhaps that there wasn't further land damage, or perhaps that their dwelling was okay. So what we're doing on the basis of you notifying me of a contents claim, I'm also opening a building claim or a land claim together with that contents one per event. But in terms of out of the 3-month time period, you're absolutely right, I can't accept claims outside of that 3-month time period. And that was extended from 1 month in, I think, November 2010 from memory, out to 3 months, and that's under the legislation.
Given just what you've said about other claims being allowed, how does that then feed into apportionment? Doesn't that delay the actual resolution of a claim? Because now suddenly, despite not actually making a claim for land, the original claim is now an apportionment because there is a claim against different events.
So if I understand this right, me opening a dwelling claim where you've got dwelling damage, you don't want me to do that?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is the lady over here says that she has failed to put in a claim within 3 months, and that's fine. What you said was that if I understood you correctly, if she laid a contents claim, then there was also a house or land claim opened for her. Is that correct, or have I misunderstood?
So we have the ability to do that. So my legal advice is you or you telling me that you've got a contents claim for that event is notifying me of earthquake damage. And then if you then say, actually I had land damage or I had dwelling damage from that event as well, then we can open that exposure, as we call it. Okay, so
the issue was from that date.
Yeah, so that doesn't automatically open another land damage claim?
No.
Sorry, sorry if I wasn't clear.
We'll just take this one down here. I'm not sure. Ma'am, is there comments on this question or... Okay. We'll go to you, ma'am.
I was recently speaking to someone at Arrow about having a conversation about buying a section within the Kaiapoi Township rather than a subdivision. And it was pointed out to me that what drilling has been done in Kaiapoi today has shown parts of Kaiapoi's land is much poorer than originally the categories indicated. And so foundations for new builds in the town would have to be much more robust. Earlier you spoke on this with the slides regarding land improvement, site improvement needs that may go down a number of metres. This person at Arrow pointed out to me that our insurance policy states that they will only cover foundation instalments of what's at ground level or above ground level, and the person building would have to find the cost to meet below ground foundation works. That has huge implications for both buyers and sellers of sections within areas and that are not in subdivision-wide remediated areas.
Without knowing your specific circumstances, it's quite hard to give you a solid answer on that. But if it's a new section that you've brought and you were rebuilding from a previous site, then one of the key things might be what would you have required at the previous site? Because generally speaking, an insurance policy will respond to what your loss was at the site that you had. So if there was a requirement to build that particular style of foundations at the previous site, but if there was an increased cost because you've moved to another site...
We rezone.
Oh, you're red zoned, okay. So in that case, I would imagine that it would have been assessed on what was assessed as the cost within the red zone, and then needs to be compared with where you're moving to. So that would be the direct comparison that I would be asking of your insurer to say, okay, what were you allowing for there? What are the costs associated with the site that I'm looking to go to, and then what's the difference? And then you need to get clear about what the policy provides cover for. But generally speaking, if it was a cost that wouldn't have been incurred somewhere else, then it would be an additional cost that might need to be borne by yourself at the new site.
Okay, take a couple more questions and then we'll draw to a close. Thanks. Over here.
It's got one question related to what that lady was saying. We've actually got a piece of TC3 land that we're trying to sell, and we haven't been for the last 12 months. How come she... we can't actually sell our land. We actually had to buy another house. I'll just give you our example. And I know that other people on our street have had the same thing happen to them. A lot of them didn't settle with the insurance company, they wanted to rebuild. And that was before we were classified orange zone. From that orange zone we were then told that we were going to get an answer on whether we're going green or red. 6 months later we were told we were TC3, and then we thought we were green zone. The insurance companies came in, demolished all our houses, and we all thought we would be able to sell our land because it's green zone. We've since then found that buyers don't want to come anywhere near our land because they don't have any clear indication of when all this drilling stuff's going to end. No bank wants to lend against it, and we still have to pay rates on it. So we're paying rates on our TC3 land plus the house we had to purchase because we were forcibly removed from our Hilton Street property because the council had plans to remediate our land, and that was before the orange zone came in. And I know there are other people in Kaiapoi who want to buy in Kaiapoi and not the subdivisions, but nothing's been done with our TC3 land for them to buy our property. So we're stuck with this piece of land we can't sell, we're paying rates on, and we had to lend against to buy our other house, so we're still paying extra interest.
So I guess the only good news that's coming out of tonight for you is the fact the drilling program is coming to Kaiapoi now, so then that information will be out there. But we are working hard to try and get all the players, if you like, in the industry, whether they be builders, whether they be real estate agents, to understand you can build really good houses on TC3 land, And a TC3 house, especially if it's got one of these new foundations, is likely to perform just as well as a house on TC1 or TC2 land. So that's what we're trying to do. I guess we had this issue when we came up with this, this land, doing the TC1, TC2, TC3, about how much of land in Christchurch to make red. And, we could have made much bigger areas of Christchurch red, but that would have cost, it would have been a lot more disruption for everybody. It's just been a very, very difficult trade-off to make. But I hear for a lot of people, life is very, very difficult because of these things.
Sorry, can I ask that gentleman from the UQC again? The question I raised before and the gentleman responded to with a similar query on apportionment. I take your point of view on the aspect of the claimant had lodged a contents and dwelling claim. Yep. But in this particular situation didn't. It was only a dwelling claim. Didn't lodge a claim on contents. So it really does go back to apportionment, because at this particular point in time, Earthquake Commission has only accepted one claim that's been lodged, denied the second one, even though 2 assessments, independent assessments, have been done by EQC assessors. The first assessment says that the damages are under cap. So at this stage, we're waiting for for Fletcher's to come in and manage the process of remediation or repair. Yep. But quite frankly, we know when they come in, they won't cope, and it will be well and truly over the cap. But EQC have denied the second claim, and so therefore it does become a situation of apportionment. And that is the question I would like addressed, if possible.
So after every event, after every earthquake, who here remembers EQC's advertising saying if you've got further damage, lodge a claim? Anybody? Okay. So I'm constrained under the legislation in terms of what claims I can take out of time. Okay, so we did our level best after every single event, no matter how large or how small it was, to say if you think you've got more damage, lodge another claim. Okay, is that fair? I mean, that's what we did. So who here lodged a claim after every single event? Right. So I'm struggling to understand the question. If it's about...
Sorry, it's not about me personally.
Yeah, and is it better for me to talk to you after this? Because I really am struggling to understand the question. I don't want to sound silly.
You claim after each successive event. 2 assessments have been done. The first one accepted, the second not accepted, because it was lodged outside of the time frame. Third earthquake claim lodged. Yep. No assessment done. Still waiting.
So,
and each time we ring to say, when is the next assessment being done, because it's now in person, you're on the urgent priority list, but we've heard that for 6 months.
Well, ma'am, can I ask you to talk to Brian afterwards, okay? All right, this will be the last one.
Yeah, hey, Don. I'm in the same situation as the fellow at the back there, where he's got his house in the section in TC3 and he can't sell. With my property as well, that's in TC3. Over the fence, it's TC2. TC3 2/1. It's a new subdivision, and you're saying that between like 100 metres, that you can say that shouldn't my property be in that same situation or not?
Mike Jacob.
Yeah, hi, my name is Mike Jacob from the Engineering Advisory Group run by DBH. Thank you for asking the question. I was getting quite lonely. Didn't think anyone cared about me. Yeah, so you'll be up on near Beach Road, are you? Then across the road there's a new subdivision going in.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So as part of that new subdivision, they're going to have to do a lot of work to improve the top couple of metres of that ground. So there's a bit of fill to go in there, and they'll need to compact that really well. And so as part of that subdivision development, they'll be bringing the land up to a standard that's suitable for the sorts of foundations that they're proposing. When Roger talked earlier about the sort of work that needs to be done in the red zone, it was effectively clearing everything and then rebuilding it from scratch as a new subdivision, but going that little bit extra to make it better. And so that's what they'll have to do in that new area, to make sure that the foundations you build, be they TC2 style probably, are suitable by improving that land. Does that make sense? Yeah. So those properties to the north of Beach Road up around where we are here now, the reason they're classified as TC2 is because there was no liquefaction observed in any of the earthquakes, very little building damage observed.
It's not on this property either, no liquefaction either.
Yeah, so...
And all neighbouring properties.
Yeah.
So existing homes are TC2 and they can be sold, but the one over the road on TC3, no liquefaction, can't be sold.
Yeah, and so what you've had over there is this issue about the TCs being an area-wide assessment, and they don't look individually at every single property. You can imagine if I could run through 180,000 properties and give them a TC, you'd still be here waiting for your original TCs. And so the process in that case is to look at the specific land, and if you need to do work on your TC3 property, then you can get that looked at.
Yeah, see, we don't. It's all been sorted. All the repairs have been done. The house is fully renovated, and it's actually for sale, and there's no one living in it. And there's people in red zone that need a house to live in. They've been through the open homes, they've put their offers in, and they go to the bank, and they've got the finance, but then the bank's saying no, because it's in this TC3 area. So we're getting nowhere, and then there's these poor people out there that have no house to live in.
Exactly.
Yeah. So something needs to be sort of done about priorities of houses for sale as well.
I mean, that's something, an issue identified 6 months ago, so we've had a number of these seminars with the banks and all the valuers to try and get them to understand it. I think what's going to happen over time is the banks are going to work out that actually I really will lend on TC3, I just need to get an XYZ report from an engineering firm that understands this sort of stuff. If you go to the average banker at the moment, you say, look, you need to go and get an XYZ geotech report on that land, the banker looks at you like you're from Mars. And what's just going to happen over time is the banks will work out, once they get that information, they should be really confident about lending, just like they lend everywhere else. It's just going to take time for banks to work out how to do that. I think what we've seen lately from Westpac and Lumley is they actually get that by doing new things, they can actually get business. And I think the banks are, I'm really hopeful the banks will move really soon. But I hear your frustration, sir.
The house has been empty for over a year and a half, so people could be living there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of the answer is you should have no trouble, therefore, in selling it to someone who's been fully paid out from one of these red zone places who didn't have a mortgage, who doesn't need any finance.
Would you like me to leave your phone number, my phone number then?
Well, maybe you need your own sign over the corner here for the people who are red zone.
Okay, look, thanks everyone. I'm going to ask Roger to just make a few closing remarks in a minute. Just before I do, just remind you, we have EQC, insurer representatives, Department of Building and Housing over here. Out in the foyer, we have support coordinators and representatives from community law and from the accommodation service. So if you do have other questions that you've not had an opportunity to get answered in the wider group, or you do want to talk to someone one-to-one, these folks will be available. So thank you, and I'll pass over to Roger.
Look, the only final comment I was going to make is, these are really difficult times. Make sure you get the support you need, but also in getting advice, if you need legal advice, you need to make sure you get good quality legal advice. Community law are out the front, they can help you with lots of issues, or out the front, out the back, they can help you with lots of issues. But in some cases, if you've got a complex issue around insurance, you may need to go further and get other legal advice. And that legal advice might come from the lawyer that did your will or help you buy the last house, but it may come from a lawyer who really knows insurance law as well. It's important, these are big transactions, you get good quality advice and support. Thank you.
Thanks very much.